Alright, so hey everyone. Today I want to talk about some of the improvements I think that can be made for DUSK controller support. Currently it's only on PC, but it is planned to come to consoles, starting with the Switch. And hopefully some of the requests that I'm making today will um, be implemented by the time of those versions releases. But jumping straight into it, DUSK uses a 20% square dead zone, so you have to move the stick that far before anything starts, movement starts occurring. It's a little more for the corners since it's a square. Square dead zones have the side effect of restricting diagonal movement around the axes, so I can make wobbly movements like this and move perfectly left. I can make it a very obvious angle like this and move perfectly right. It's obvious when looking up or down. You don't see diagonal movement occur until you break out of these axial dead zones. 20% is a pretty common dead zone size, but it is large. You can see just how much stick movement I can make without anything occurring in game. And this brings me to the first two requests. The first being a change to a circular dead zone. This should allow you to exit the dead zone on the same distance on any angle, as well as remove these restricted diagonal regions so we can get full and correct diagonal movement. The next is a dead zone slider. Specifically, lowering a dead zone makes it easier to make precise adjustments, as well as make aiming feel more responsive in general. But on the opposite end, if you have a thumbstick that leans pretty dramatically, being able to raise it would allow the player to avoid unwanted cursor movement. As far as acceleration, I think the minimum acceleration starts a little too fast. I'd expect it to start slower than this. This is kind of the minimum speed you can access. But other than that, it increases pretty gradually up until it caps. The diagonal movement feels pretty consistent. There's no smoothing applied. Horizontal and vertical sensitivities are the same, or feel the same at least. So these are all good things. So aside from lowering the minimum acceleration, I think having control over the acceleration curve, as in how your stick movement and turn rate are related, would give players an absolute ton of control. And maybe the acceleration curve follows a power function, and players could have control over the degree of that. So, for example, a player using high sensitivity could use a higher degree function so that they can still make precise adjustments, that their acceleration will start out slower. Whereas someone using a lower sensitivity or modest sensitivity could use a more linear or linear curve, whatever their preference would be, and having an option would allow them to do that. DUSK has some extraordinarily generous auto aim options, and that skirts some of the issues with the current system. And specifically for the Switch and possibly the PS4 versions, if gyro is implemented, that could also skirt these issues. But it'd be nice if the thumbstick controls were upgraded so that the auto aim isn't necessary for comfortable gameplay. And I think with these options and changes, it'll definitely do that. Moving on, as far as the layout, there's two layouts available, and they changed a few things. Most importantly is the layout 1, which I'm using as jump on A. Layout 2 has it on the trigger, which is more convenient. But having full button customization is what I'd request, because some of these layouts, of course, change other things that you might not want to be changed, and having everything bindable would allow players to customize it to their preference. On PC, you can do this through configs, but that's not available to console players, so making this a UI option is what I'd request for those versions. The D-pad is currently completely unbound, and this could be used for things like, say, quick save, quick load, holstering weapons, the cigar, things that aren't bound in any of current layouts. Movement, as soon as you pass the dead zone, you're immediately moved to running speed, and it also seems like you're limited to 8 directions. Walking is done by holding the stick in. It's more natural for controller users to have full 360-degree movement, as well as have a smooth walk to run speed gradient. Now, this might be intentional, seeing as diagonal movement's faster, and limiting it to 8 directions kind of prioritizes um, uh, these diagonal angles so that you can get kind of perfect faster movement. And with the relevant power up, walking has you automatically climb walls. So this current setup might be this way just so that you can bunny hop more effectively and not accidentally climb walls. But it is some 360-degree movement, and a smooth speed gradient is something that's more familiar to controller users. As far as weapon switching, this is done by cycling through weapons, and this is fine. A lot of games have done this, but I'd request a weapon wheel be implemented because, for example, we have the super shotgun, and if we want to switch to the riveter, we have to cycle through quite a few weapons to reach it. Whereas a weapon wheel, all weapons are accessible at any time, instantly. And DUSK has 9 weapons, and personally I think an 8-way wheel is the most efficient because you have, say, your weapon wheels on left bumper, up, down, left, right, and the diagonals are very kind of intuitive placements for weapons on the wheel. So I would say that having the firearms on the weapon wheel and then a direct bind for the melee weapon would allow an 8-way wheel and access to the melee weapon, and this wouldn't cost any more buttons than it already does for this cycling system. But also with full button customization, both styles can be swapped between, because you could maybe bind next and previous weapon as well as bind a weapon wheel and direct bind for melee. So I think both can be supported. But yeah, that about covers my request. As a quick sum up, for aiming, a change to a circular dead zone and sliders for the dead zone size and acceleration curve would make aiming feel dramatically better, so you could be more accurate and all that nice junk. Having full button customization as well as being able to bind the D-pad would allow players to set up things the way they want, very comfortably. Having full 360-degree movement with a smooth pressure gradient. Again, if this is intentional by the developer, this might be a moot point. But finally, a weapon wheel. A weapon wheel will allow faster weapon swapping than cycling currently allows. The next portion of this video is just going to be me trying to demonstrate some of these things in practice. So what a weapon wheel would look like, what personal layout I would use, and D-pad and that kind of stuff. So stick around for that if you're interested. Alright, so for this section of the video I'm just want to show these things in practice. So I've reset everything up through a mouse and keyboard emulator. For aiming, it default sticks to circular dead zones, so you can see these little wobbles are registering since it's picking up the diagonal movement, or it's applying the diagonal movement. It's very obvious when looking up or down. I've set my dead zones very small and customized acceleration curve to my preference, so I can play at a decent sensitivity while still being able to make pretty small adjustments. You can compare the minimum accelerations you can access, and it's moving in pixel steps just because it's emulating a mouse, but you can see the difference between the default DUSKs and this customization, and a lot of it has to do with the different acceleration curve too, but you can see the difference. As far as layout, I have up being my flashlight, where I've rebound the flashlight. A is actually is cover bind. Down is holstering weapons. Left on the D-pad, quick saves. right quick loads, so those are very convenient binds. As far as moving, moving the stick slowly, slightly makes you walk, moving it fully makes you run. And this is actually pretty convenient when climbing stuff. I'll probably have a separate video demonstrating that, but I haven't had an issue with it. If I want to stop climbing, I just, or not climb, I just press the stick fully, and I don't, at least in this implementation. The weapon wheel is set up and bound to left bumper, so I have all those firearms bound to that. So pistols, shotguns, super shotgun, assault rifle, hunting rifle, crossbow, mortar, riveter, and a direct bind to the melees on B. To cycle through the shotguns and pistols dual wield, I just double tap in that direction, and that'll cycle through it. For my previous example of the super shotgun to the riveter, just instant, as well as anything else, so I can go from pistols to the crossbow immediately, pistols to the hunting rifle, pistols back to the sword. Well, actually that was a riveter, but pistols back to the sword. So yeah, it's quite a bit faster than just cycling through it. One thing I didn't mention in the previous video was weapon alt fires, which most of them are zoom, and by default they are bound to the left trigger, and in the secondary layout bound to the left bumper. But I've bound mine to the right stick click, but I've also set a toggle, which is what I'd request. A toggle is very useful for this, so I don't have to hold the stick in when aiming, and it'd be useful for any other thing, like for whatever reason you had alt fire on a face button like A or on a D-pad or whatever. And this bind's also pretty convenient just in general for the on the mortar, because the alt fire for this is remote detonation, which is just the click, and for sword, it's blocking, which is a very useful toggle. So that'd be the last thing I request. But that about covers it. So better aiming controls lead to faster and more accurate aiming. Weapon wheel allows for faster weapon swapping. And being able to rebind anything as you see fit allows players to really find a layout that's comfortable to them. So hopefully the console versions will see some of these things applied, and so they can play as smoothly as they can. But otherwise, that's it, and thanks for watching.